I bought the house for silence, but the first photo I posted of the deck went viral in the family chat. 10 minutes later, Mom texted, "Great, Julian and Bree can move in by Friday." They showed up with suitcases, a crib, and a locksmith. I thought I was finally claiming my own Christmas. It turns out I was interrupting a plan that had my name forged all over it. My name is Faith Stewart. In my day-to-day life, I am a brand strategist at Redwood Meridian, an agency in Harborview that smells like cold brew and quiet ambition. I build narratives for other people, finding the core truth of a product and spinning it into something desirable. I am good at my job. I am good at taking complex, messy realities and presenting them as clean, intentional, and strong. I live in a condo that overlooks the water, all glass and concrete, a place I chose because it looks nothing like home. Home was Maple Bridge, Connecticut. A 3-story colonial with precise white shutters and a lawn that looked like it was vacuumed. Not mowed. It was the kind of house that magazines photograph in the fall. All golden maples and welcoming symmetry, but symmetry is just a form of control. Our family was a constellation, or at least that's how it felt. My parents, Gregory and Celeste Stewart, were the gravity. My older brother, Julian, 4 years my senior, was the blazing sun. And I was somewhere else, a distant moon. Maybe. The only one who seemed to see me clearly was my grandmother, Nana Ruth. The walls of that house told the whole story. They were not walls. They were a shrine to Julian. His first lacrosse stick was mounted in a glass case, like a holy relic. Plaques from his Model UN triumphs were polished and hung in a perfect, ascending line up the main staircase. His varsity letters were framed. My achievements lived in a brown banker's box under the basement stairs, next to the holiday decorations we never used. My debate team ribbons, my honor roll certificates, my first published poem from a regional journal all filed away, kept tidy and out of sight. They didn't match the decor. The erasure was a slow build, a habit, then a tradition. It was most acute around Christmas, every year. There was a reason. Oh, Faith, we thought you had plans with your friends from the city. It was such a last-minute decision to have everyone here. Honey, it completely slipped our minds. You're just so independent. We always know you're fine on your own. These were the refrains of my December. They were the polite, socially acceptable ways of saying, "We did not think of you." I can trace the pattern back, find the origin point. I was 10. It was a Saturday morning, bright and cold. The kitchen smelled of maple syrup and melting butter. Julian had a big game, and my mother was at the stove, pouring pancake batter. She was carefully shaping it into a perfect, massive letter J. Her focus was absolute, the way an artist studies a canvas. I sat at the kitchen island, waiting. The clock over the stove ticked, each second landing like a drop of water in the silence. Finally, I slid off the stool and got the bread from the pantry. I made myself toast. It was dry, and it scratched my throat on the way down. But I ate it, alone. The ticking of the clock was the only sound that acknowledged me. It only became more refined as we got older. When I was a teenager, I won a regional writing prize. It was the first time I felt a spark of real, undeniable pride. I came home holding the certificate and the small, crisp check for $100. My mother was in the kitchen, of course, sorting mail. "That's nice, dear," she said, barely glancing at the certificate. Her eyes were on an envelope from a university. "Listen, while you're here, could you proofread Julian's college essay? He's struggling with the conclusion, and you're so good with words." My prize wasn't a victory. It was a resume builder for my real job, Julian's unpaid editor, but the first great holiday erasure, the one that broke something for good, happened my first year of college. I was planning to come home, had my train ticket booked, a week before. My dad called. "Change of plans. Faith, we're all flying down to Palm Beach to see your aunt. The flights are just too expensive to add another one so late. You understand. We'll see you at New Year's." I understood. I canceled my ticket. I spent that Christmas in a deserted dorm room, eating ramen and watching old movies. In January, I went to visit Nana Ruth, and there it was. stuck to her refrigerator with a bright, cartoon magnet, the Stewart family Christmas card. My parents and Julian, beaming, standing in front of the fireplace in our living room. They were wearing matching red sweaters. The photo was dated December 24th. They hadn't gone to Palm Beach at all. They just hadn't wanted me there. Seeing it, I didn't cry. It was too cold for that. It was the sound of a door clicking shut. Quietly but finally. You learn to cope. You have to. My coping mechanism was hypercompetence. I built a life where I didn't need to be invited. I stopped asking. I stopped hinting. I stopped leaving room in my schedule. Just in case. I started planning my own Decembers with the precision of a military campaign. I booked solo trips to places where snow was a guarantee and family was an abstract concept. I bought myself the expensive bottle of wine. I learned to cook a perfect roast for one. I made my exclusion look like my choice. It's a strange thing, to have to retrain your own senses. The smell of oranges studded with cloves, that classic pomander scent, doesn't mean holiday to me. It means someone else's holiday. It smells like a party I can hear through a closed door. So I trained myself to love peppermint. I drank peppermint tea by the gallon. I bought peppermint bark and ate it directly from the tin. I kept peppermint lotion on my desk at work. It was crisp, clean, and uncomplicated. It was the scent of my silence, my hard-won, solitary peace. It was the smell of a December that belonged only to me. My work at Redwood Meridian is built on momentum. I orchestrate the ascent. For the past 6 months, that ascent had a name, Tideline Outdoors. They were a company stuck in the past, all khaki vests and complicated knots, trying to sell gear to a generation that just wanted to feel better for an afternoon. My team and I were tasked with their rebrand. My strategy was called Find Your Signal. It wasn't about conquering mountains. It was about finding a moment of clarity in the noise. We launched the digital-first campaign in late summer. Today was the review. I stood at the head of the glass boardroom, the harbor view fog pressing against the windows. The clients were on the main screen, their faces pixelated but clear enough. I advanced to the final slide. In conclusion, I said, my voice crisp in the quiet room, the campaign metrics have not just met, but crushed our targets. We exceeded the 12-month projected engagement in 90 days. The new demographic, 18 to 25, is up over 400%. I let the numbers hang in the air. I don't celebrate in meetings. I present facts. The facts were, we had won. My performance review was that Friday. My boss, Arthur, gestured for me to close the door. Faith, he said, I'm not going to waste your time with corporate platitudes. The Tideline clients are ecstatic. The board is ecstatic. He slid a heavy cream-colored envelope across the desk. Your standard raise is in the system for January. This is a bonus, effective immediately. I opened it. Inside was a check made out to me. Faith Stewart. The number printed in stark black ink was $85,000. I looked at it until the numbers blurred. It wasn't a number. It was a door opening. I stared at it, half expecting the ink to blink, to vanish. It was real. Thank you, Arthur, I said. My voice was steady. You earned it, he replied. Go. Enjoy your weekend. I walked out of the office, the check secure in my bag. My hand kept touching the leather, reassuring itself it was still there. I had the automatic, conditioned reflex to call my parents. I crushed it. What would I even say? I didn't need to guess. Just last month, my father, Gregory, had texted me a link to an MBA program. Have you considered grad school like your brother Julian had his MBA? He also had a rotating series of consulting gigs, and, as far as I knew, still had my parents paying his car insurance. My $85,000 would be nice, a good start, before the conversation inevitably turned to Julian's potential. My team, my real colleagues, insisted on celebrating. We went to a taco joint down the street, loud with music and sizzling fajitas. Priya, Gabe, and Luce, my creative partners, raised their glasses of beer. To Faith, Gabe shouted. The only person who could make mosquito netting seem aspirational. We laughed. I ate. I smiled. I felt a genuine warmth, but after an hour, I slipped outside. The coastal air was sharp and damp. I leaned against the brick wall and dialed the only number I wanted to. Nana Ruth's residence. This is the Queen, her voice crackled. Hi, Nana. Faith. Kiddo. What's that sound you at a party? Sort of. We landed a big campaign. It went really well. I told her about the metrics, the client's reaction, and then I told her about the envelope. I said the number out loud. They gave me a bonus, Nana. $85,000. There was a sharp, perfect silence on the line. Then she just said, "Well, it's about time they noticed." Her voice was rough. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. You built this all by yourself." That was it. That was the validation. "Thanks, Nana. I just wanted you to know." "I always know," she said. "Now go back to your friends. Don't waste a good party." I went home, but sleep was impossible. The money was sitting in my savings account, and combined with what I had already aggressively saved, it wasn't just a nest egg anymore. It was an escape hatch. I opened my laptop, the screen bright in my dark condo. I started on Zillow. It was a passive hobby, a way to dream. I usually looked at minimalist lofts in the city, but the Tideline campaign, all those images of granite and pine had shifted something in me. On an impulse, I changed the search area. I typed, High Timber, a small town in the Elk Crest Range I'd driven through once, 3 hours from the coast. I scrolled past log cabins and dated ranches, and then I stopped. It was an A-frame, pure, dramatic, and black. It was all angles, a dark triangle against a backdrop of snow and pine. The listing was new, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a massive deck. It was listed by Elk Crest Realty. It was almost midnight. I found the agency's website and clicked the number, expecting a recorded message. Elk Crest Realty, Maya Linwood speaking. Her voice was alert, professional. "Oh," I said, startled. "Hi, my name is Faith Stewart. I'm calling about the A-frame on Kestrel Ridge. I know it's incredibly late." "The city folks always call late," she said, her voice smiling. "It's when you have time to dream, right? That house is a beauty. Just came on the market." "I'm in Harborview," I said. "I can't get up there for a few days." "No problem," Maya said. "I'm 10 minutes away." "You want a video walkthrough right now?" My phone buzzed. A FaceTime request. I accepted. Maya's face appeared, framed by a parka hood. "Okay, Faith, let's buy a house." She turned the camera. "Here we are. Keys in." The door swung open. She hit the lights, and my breath caught. The entire wall facing the valley was glass. The ceiling soared up to a single, sharp peak, crossed with heavy, rough-sawn beams. Pine light, warm and golden, poured across the wooden floors, reflecting from the simple overhead fixtures. "This is the main living area," Maya said, her voice echoing slightly. "The fireplace is stone, floor to ceiling." She walked me through the galley kitchen, the downstairs bedroom. She climbed a spiral staircase to a loft space that looked out over the entire room. "Guest room up here, too," she said. "What's out the windows?" I asked. "The big ones." "The valley," she said. "Hold on." She went back downstairs, and I heard the slide of a heavy glass door. A rush of wind filled my speaker. "This," she said, stepping outside, "is the deck." The camera panned. It was dark, but I could see the vast, empty space. A few lights glittered thousands of feet below. The deck was enormous, hanging over nothing. It stared down a valley of blue cold. It was isolated. It was magnificent. "It's a lot," I said, my voice small. Maya turned the camera back to her face. "It is. It's not a house for everyone. But the bones are good. She's solid." We hung up. I sat in the silence of my gray-walled condo. I closed my eyes. I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding my whole adult life. Can I picture waking up here alone and feeling safe? I pictured my childhood home in Maple Bridge, always full of people, always humming with Julian's needs, a place where I felt constantly, quietly unsafe, waiting for the next erasure. Then I pictured the A-frame, the single road, the stone fireplace, the deck staring into the void. The absolute, profound silence. The answer was a physical thing. It was a loosening in my chest, a deep, slow breath that felt like the first one I'd taken in years. Yes, the next morning, I did not call a mortgage broker. I went online and, for a small filing fee, I created Halcyon Pine LLC. Halcyon, for the mythical bird that calms the wind and waves. Pine, for the trees that would guard the house. My name would not be on the deed. My name would not be on the utilities. The house would belong to the LLC. It was a fortress. It was a boundary made of corporate law. I opened a new business bank account and wired the entire $85,000 bonus, plus my savings. At 9:01 a.m., I called Maya Linwood. "I'm making an offer," I said. "You haven't even smelled the air up here yet," she laughed. "I saw everything I needed to," I said. "I'm making an all-cash offer. 21-day close, through my LLC. The professional in her snapped to attention. "Okay, Faith. Let's get it done." I submitted the offer $10,000 below the asking price. I knew an estate was selling it. They wanted efficiency. They countered at $5,000 higher. I looked at the email. My finger hovered over the keyboard. This was the click. I was not asking permission. I was not waiting for an invitation. I typed, accepted. My fingers were buzzing. For the next 3 weeks, I was a machine. I worked my full day at Redwood Meridian. My focus absolute. At night, I signed digital documents, reviewed inspection reports, and arranged wire transfers. I told no one, except, while waiting for the title search, I opened the Notes app on my phone. I made a new file. I typed 4 lines. A new creed for a new life. Keys mine. Address private. Mail, P.O. Box. Access invite only. Closing day was a Friday in late November. I signed the last document in a sterile title office in Harborview, and the keys, 3 new, sharp-toothed brass keys, were placed in my hand. They felt impossibly heavy. I drove my sedan, not a moving truck. The trunk was filled with a borrowed toolkit, 2 down pillows, a new sleeping bag, and a duffel bag of clothes. In the passenger seat, I had a large thermos of black coffee and my phone. The playlist I had made for the 3-hour drive was called Different December. It was all instrumental, full of cellos and quiet pianos. It was the sound of purpose. The sun was setting by the time I pulled up the gravel drive. The A-frame was a sharp, black shadow against a bruised purple sky. I got out of the car, and the cold hit me. It was a clean, high-altitude cold that smelled like pine and snow. I used one of the new keys. The click of the deadbolt sliding back echoed. I stood in the entryway. The house was empty, cavernous, and smelled of stale air and cedar. My footsteps boomed on the hardwood floors. My first night, I didn't even try to set up a bed. I inflated an air mattress and threw the sleeping bag on it, right in the middle of the great room, facing the wall of glass and the stone fireplace. It was so cold. I could see my breath fogging in the moonlight. I found the gas valve for the fireplace and, after a few tries, a line of blue flame snapped to life. It began to heat the stone, but the glass sucked the warmth away. I lay there, fully dressed in the sleeping bag, and a strange, hollow ache settled in my chest. It was the ache of being the only adult in the room. There was no one to call for help, no one to ask about the furnace, no one to blame. The safety, the warmth, the entire physical reality of the next hour was my problem to solve. For the first time, that knowledge didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a foundation. I fell asleep watching the flames. My breath slowly stopped fogging. My life split in 2. Weekdays. I was in Harborview, sharp and focused, leading meetings at Redwood Meridian. But at 5 p.m, on the dot, I was in my car, driving the 3 hours up the mountain. I'd work until I couldn't keep my eyes open, sleep on the air mattress, wake up at 5 a.m, and drive back to the city. I was fueled by coffee and adrenaline. Those first weeks were a montage of pure physical labor. The kitchen cabinets were a dark, dated cherry. I spent a whole weekend sanding them down. Sawdust worked its way into my eyelashes, into my hair, under my nails. My shoulders burned, but as the dark stain gave way to pale, raw wood, I felt like I was stripping away a layer of my own skin, exposing something new. I hated the light fixtures. They were builder grade, brass and glass globes that cast a sick, yellow light. I bought sleek, black track lighting online. I spent an entire Tuesday night on a stepladder, my arms aching, studying wiring diagrams on my phone. When I flipped the breaker and the new, warm white bulbs flooded the kitchen in clean light, I nearly wept with satisfaction. The most important job was the locks. The old deadbolts were flimsy. I ordered heavy-duty smart locks, the kind you could control with your phone. I chiseled out the door frames to fit the new, reinforced strike plates. I installed the keypads, set a new master code known only to me, and enabled the entry log. The decisive, solid thunk of the new bolt sliding into place was the sound of absolute security. My furniture deliveries started. I bought a real mattress, a deep sofa, and then I ordered 2 identical, simple wooden bed frames. I had them delivered to the 2 upstairs guest rooms. I assembled them myself, with an Allen wrench and a small hammer. I put every piece together. I tightened every bolt. These were not rooms for a family I was obligated to host. They were not shrines to someone else's achievements. I was building these beds, with my own hands, because I wanted to choose who got to stay. I wanted to build a place for the people who, like me, had spent too many holidays feeling like an afterthought. I made the beds with flannel sheets and thick duvets. I stood in the doorway of the first finished room, and for a moment, I just breathed. The deck was my sanctuary. One clear, freezing night. I took 300 feet of warm, white string lights and wound them around the entire railing. It took hours. My fingers went numb. But when I was done, I plugged in the extension cord. The deck glowed. In the pitch black of the mountain, it looked like a ship floating in the dark. I stood there, mug of tea in hand, and looked down into the valley. It was a vast, dark shape, a few distant lights twinkling like stars. The outline from the map came back to me. The valley looked like a sleeping animal, and my home was a small, warm light watching over it. The next Saturday, I made my first real trip to the grocery store in High Timber. The town was one main street, nestled in the pass. The store was small but had everything. As I was checking out, the cashier, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, gestured to my pile of coffee, eggs, and cleaning supplies. "You moving in somewhere?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Just closed on the A-frame up on Kestrel Ridge." Her eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, the cedar A-frame. You're the one who got it. That place has good bones. We all wondered who'd finally give it some love." "I'm trying," I said, smiling. "Well, welcome to High Timber," she said, bagging my groceries. "We're glad to have you." It was a simple exchange. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it was the first time I had ever been welcomed to a place. I wasn't an extension of Julian or a temporary visitor. I was the new owner. I had good bones. The house was ready for a test. I needed to know if it could hold joy, or if it was just a fortress. I invited Priya, Gabe, and Luce up for a trial weekend. They were my work friends, the ones who had become real friends, the ones who had celebrated my bonus with tacos and zero jealousy. They arrived on a Friday night, stomping snow off their boots, their arms full of board games and a grocery bag. "We brought the ingredients for my grandmother's chili," Priya announced. "Gabe is our designated vegetable chopper. Luce is on cornbread." My kitchen, my clean, repainted, brightly lit kitchen, filled with noise, with the sound of chopping, of sizzling onions, of 3 people arguing happily over which board game to play first. We ate the chili sitting on the floor around the coffee table, because my dining table hadn't arrived yet, and then we played. Laughter, real, loud, unrestrained laughter, ricocheted off the high, beamed ceiling, It was a soft, warm proof. This house could hold it. It wasn't just my quiet place. It could be our quiet place. The next morning, I sat on the deck with my coffee, watching the sun rise. Priya came out, wrapped in a blanket, and just sat beside me. We didn't talk for 10 minutes. "Faith," she said finally, "this place is magic." Before they left, I gave Nana Ruth her official tour. I walked through the house with my phone on FaceTime, showing her everything. "Here's the new kitchen," I said, panning over the counters. "I painted the cabinets, and look at this backsplash tile the old owners left. I kind of like it." "Good Lord, kiddo," she crackled. "That looks like ribbon candy, the old-fashioned kind. But you're right, it's cheerful." I showed her the fireplace, the loft, and finally, the deck. I turned the camera to the view. She whistled. "Well," she said, "you did it. You really did it. You built your own mountain." Her voice was thick. "I'm proud of you, Faith." "Thanks, Nana," I said, my own throat tight. "It's a start." That night, after my friends had gone and the house was quiet again, I felt a new kind of peace. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, charged with the memory of laughter. I curled up on the sofa by the fire. I opened my private Instagram, the one I kept for just myself and a handful of friends. I scrolled, thinking. Then I posted 3 photos. The first was the deck. Taken that morning, the fog was settled in the valley below, making it look like an ocean of clouds, the sun just breaking over the far ridge. The second was a close-up my favorite mug, full of coffee, resting on the arm of the sofa, the stone of the hearth blurred in the background. The third was just a corner of the fireplace, the flames bright and warm. I thought about the caption for a long time. Finally, I typed 5 simple words, bought myself a quiet place. I hit post, and then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. I turned my phone back on the next morning. The house was blissfully quiet, the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the cold pine air. I'd slept for 9 solid hours, a deep, dreamless sleep. I felt for the first time in my adult life, completely settled. Then I looked at the screen. It was glowing, a cascade of notifications, all stacked on top of each other. All from a single source, the Stewart Family Updates group chat. This was a digital graveyard. It was a place my father occasionally posted articles about bond yields, or an aunt I barely knew shared blurry photos of a rose bush. It was almost always dormant. Today, it was on fire. My phone vibrated across the wooden table with the force of an angry hornet's nest. I opened it. The silence of the room felt brittle. Someone, probably my mother, had screenshotted my private Instagram post and pasted it directly into the chat. The picture of my deck. "Serene at dawn." The caption, "Bought myself a quiet place." The first text was from an aunt. "Whose house is this? It's beautiful." Another cousin. "Where did you go?" "Faith, the mountains." And then, the payload, the one that changed the weather in the room. It was from my mother, Celeste. Her tone was bright, cheerful, and absolutely terrifying. "Exciting news. Everyone, Faith bought a wonderful mountain getaway. It's perfect timing. As you know, Julian and Brielle need so much more space with the baby on the way, and their lease is up. We'll bring their nursery things up this Friday. So blessed." I read the words, and then I read them again. "We'll bring their things up Friday." I almost laughed. It was that absurd. It wasn't a question. It wasn't. "Faith, congratulations. What a lovely home. Would you ever consider—" It was a proclamation, a done deal. My new house, the one I had paid for with 6 months of 60-hour work weeks, the one I had sanded and painted and secured with my own aching hands, had just been declared a crown colony for the Republic of Julian. Before I could even process the violation, my father, Gregory, chimed in. His text arrived with the dryness of a legal disclaimer. "It is generally prudent to consult family before making purchases of this magnitude. Faith, we need to discuss the tax implications and the liability." Not you. And then, the final, perfect punctuation. Julian. His response was a single, triumphant thumbs up emoji. It was followed, 1 second later, by a photograph. It was a picture taken inside a U-Haul storage unit. In the foreground were dozens of flattened cardboard boxes, stacked high. Scrawled across the top one in thick black marker was one word, nursery. I set the phone down on the table. My heart, which should have been hammering against my ribs, was unsettlingly steady, but my hands, which had been wrapped around my warm coffee mug, were suddenly painfully cold. The heat from the ceramic couldn't seem to reach the skin. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an annexation. They saw my quiet place, my hard-won peace, and in the space of 10 minutes, they had rezoned it as Julian's annex. They were already moving in. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a solo text. From Mom. The group chat was the public announcement. This was the private directive. Faith, I'm so glad we're all on the same page. It's such a relief. Now, Christmas is at your place. That's settled. It's non-negotiable. We can't wait to see it. And don't you worry your head about a thing. We'll cover all the groceries. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of non-negotiable, as if she were my CEO, not the mother who had systematically forgotten me for 2 decades. The offer to cover groceries was the masterstroke. It was the classic Stewart maneuver, make an outrageous, invasive demand, and then soften it with a petty, insulting offer of generosity, as if paying for a bag of potatoes and a turkey gave them rights to my deed. I sat there. I thought about all the ways I could respond, the polite ways, the deferrals. I'm sorry. That doesn't really work for me. The house isn't ready for guests. Maybe we can talk about it another time. All the soft, accommodating, female phrases I had been trained to use, all the phrases that meant, please walk all over me, but let me pretend I have a say. I deleted them. I typed 3 words. No, I've made other plans. I hit send. The small blue bubble sat there in the chat history, stark and final. It was the heaviest 3 words I had ever written. It took less than 2 minutes. My phone didn't buzz with a text. It rang, loudly, my father's name, Gregory Stewart, lit up the screen. I let it ring twice. I took 1 slow breath, tasting the peppermint from my morning tea. I pressed accept. I did not say, "Hi, Dad," I said. "Hello?" Faith. His voice was the one he used for board meetings, the one that implied he was reasonable and calm, and everyone else was being hysterical and foolish. "I just saw your text to your mother. She's very upset." I waited. Silence is my turf now. In my house. He continued, the annoyance creeping into his voice when I didn't immediately apologize. "This isn't a game. Your brother's lease is ending. You went and bought a 3-bedroom house. It's a simple alignment of resources. Be useful." Be useful. Not be kind. Not be generous. Not be family. Be useful. I was not his daughter. I was a resource, a line item, a spare bedroom in the family's expanding portfolio. I kept my voice perfectly even, matching his corporate chill. I understand Julian's situation. However, my house is not a solution for him. No one is moving in. That is final, I added, as a courtesy. Please do not come uninvited. There was a sharp, cold silence on the other end. I had never spoken to him like this. I had never used the word final. I heard him huff, a short, sharp sound of pure offense. He wasn't angry. He was insulted. "We'll see about this, Faith," he said. The line clicked dead. He had hung up on me. My hands were no longer cold. They were moving. I went to the Stewart Family Updates group chat. Screenshot. I went to my mother's solo text message. Screenshot. My 3-word reply. Screenshot. I opened my call log, showing the incoming call from Gregory Stewart and its duration. Screenshot. I opened the secure folder on my cloud drive, the one I used for work contracts. I created a new, encrypted subfolder. I named it Deck Boundaries. I uploaded every single image. This was not a family disagreement. This was a hostile takeover. and I was building my case. My phone rang again. I flinched, assuming it was my mother, ready for the emotional assault. But it was Nana Ruth. I let out the breath I was holding and answered, my voice suddenly soft. Hi, Nana. I just got off the phone with your mother, she said. No preamble. Nana Ruth never used preamble. She saw it as a waste of good time. She's in hysterics, crying, says you bought a mansion in the mountains and you've locked her out. Says you won't even let them come for Christmas. I posted one photo last night. Nana, I said, my voice flat. I bought a small A-frame. Within an hour, they had decided, without asking me, to move Julian and Brielle in on Friday. Nana Ruth made a sound. It was a short, sharp snort of derision. Of course they did. A vacuum hates to be empty, and your family hates to see you have a single thing that isn't, in some way, for them. Don't let them bully you, kiddo. I don't plan to, I said, looking at the deck boundaries folder on my laptop screen. Good. You owe them nothing. You don't owe them a holiday. You don't owe them a spare room, and you sure as hell don't owe them an explanation for your own life. She paused, and I heard the clink of ice in a glass. But I know them. They'll drive up anyway. Your parents. They think no is just a suggestion. They think it's the opening offer in a negotiation they always win. So let me be very clear with you. Faith, if those cars pull up your driveway, you do not open that door. You lock it. You check that it's locked, and you call the local sheriff. You tell them you have uninvited trespassers on your property. You understand me? The words, sheriff and trespassers, hung in the cold, pine-scented air of my living room. It was a shocking, brutal escalation, and at the same time, it was the most profound validation I had ever received. She saw it. She saw them for exactly what they were. I understand, Nana. Good, she said again. You enjoy that house. You earned it. Now send me a picture of that ribbon candy backsplash. I want to see it for myself. We hung up. I looked out the glass wall at the valley, vast and silent. The dread was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it wasn't panic. It was the cold, clear-headed focus of a strategist on the first day of a very long, very necessary campaign. They had made their move. Now it was my turn. Nana Ruth's words were a ballast. Call the sheriff. But I was a strategist. I knew you didn't just call the sheriff. You didn't make a panicked, hysterical call that could be dismissed as a family spat. You built the groundwork first. You prepared the field. You presented them with a set of facts so cold and hard they couldn't be argued, only acknowledged. My father's voice echoed in my head, be useful. He was about to find out just how useful I could be, though not in the way he intended. The dread from their texts was a physical thing, a cold pressure in my chest, but my mind was already moving. I opened my laptop, the deck boundaries folder minimized on the screen. I didn't search for family counselor or mediator. I searched for high timber property litigation. The first result was a firm, Winters Legal. The website was minimalist, all gray and black, with sharp, high-resolution photos of granite and ice. The tagline was, clarity, strategy, resolution. The head attorney's name was Sable Winters. I called her office at 9 a.m. the next morning. I was still in the mountains. The thought of returning to Harborview and leaving my house undefended was impossible. The receptionist put me on hold for less than 10 seconds. Sable Winters. Her voice was like her website clear, cold, and carrying no inflection. Ms. Winters, my name is Faith Stewart. I am the new owner of the property at Kestrel Ridge, under the LLC Halcyon Pine. I need a 1-hour consultation regarding trespass and occupancy rights. I am available today. There was a quiet tapping of a keyboard. I can see you at 2 p.m. Bring your LLC operating agreement and your deed. The line clicked. I spent the next 4 hours organizing my deck boundaries folder. I printed the group chat texts. I printed my mother's non-negotiable demand. I printed the photo Julian had sent of the boxes marked nursery. I put them in a crisp, black folder. Sable Winter's office was on the main street of high timber, above the high-end gear shop. The office itself was silent. The walls were a deep charcoal. There were no family photos, no diplomas, just two large, abstract paintings of a winter forest. She was a woman in her 40s, sharp and precise, in a dark wool dress. She didn't shake my hand. She gestured to the chair. "Ms. Stewart, you have a property issue." "I have a family issue that is attempting to become a property issue," I said. I placed the black folder on her polished desk. "My family believes they are moving into my new home on Friday. I do not want them there." I laid it out. The history of erasure, told in 5 concise minutes, the purchase of the house, the Instagram post, and then the deluge of texts. She read every single screenshot. Her expression did not change. She did not wince or sigh or offer any sympathy. She was a scientist examining data. When she finished, she looked up at me, her gaze analytical. "This is not," she said, "an uncommon story up here. Money, entitlement, and second homes. It's a combustible mix." She tapped the screenshot from my mother. "This is presumptive. This," she tapped the photo from Julian, "is complicity. And this," she tapped my father's text, "is an attempt at economic coercion." I felt a sudden, dizzying wave of relief. It was the relief of being seen. She hadn't called me dramatic. She hadn't said, "But it's your family." She had diagnosed the threat with surgical precision. "You have 2 things in your favor, Ms. Stewart," she continued. "First, you were incredibly smart to purchase under the LLC. Halcyon Pine owns the house. You are merely its managing member. This provides a crucial layer of legal distance. Second, you have given them a clear written notice of no. Your position is unambiguous." "What's the next step?" I asked. "My grandmother told me to call the sheriff if they show up." "Your grandmother is correct," Sable said. "But we will optimize that call. We are going to file a formal no trespass letter with the county sheriff's office. Effective immediately, it will name Gregory Stewart, Celeste Stewart, and Julian Stewart. It will be recorded against your parcel number. This way, if you do have to call, you are not a hysterical daughter. You are the representative of an LLC reporting a violation of a recorded legal notice. The police hate ambiguity. We are going to remove it. For 1 hour. We built the fortress. We drafted the letter. It was polite, formal, and terrifying. It cited the parcel number and the name of the LLC. It stated that the named individuals were not permitted on the property at any time and that their presence would be considered criminal trespass. "I will have this filed and recorded by 4 p.m. today," Sable said, sliding it into a file. "A copy will be sent to the sheriff's duty desk." "What else?" I asked, my voice gaining strength. "You are a strategist," Sable said, looking at my intake form. "So you know the next step is reinforcing your perimeter." I drove from her office not home, but to the hardware store in the next town over. I bought a new, heavy-duty strike plate and a box of 3-inch wood screws. Back at the A-frame, I began my own practical playbook. I went to my laptop. I had installed exterior cameras as soon as I bought the place. Simple ones. Now, I logged into the admin panel. I angled the one by the driveway to get a perfect, clear shot of the gravel approach and any license plates. I angled the porch camera to capture every inch of the front door. I enabled the audio recording. I downloaded the entry log app that synced with my smart locks, giving me a second-by-second record of every code tried, every failed attempt, every successful entry. I rotated my own master code, just in case. Then, I opened a new document. I typed, "Guest Policy, Halcyon Pine LLC." I wrote 1. All guests are permitted by written invitation only, with specific dates. 2. No invitation shall be considered standing or open. 3. No subletting, cohabitating, or mail forwarding is permitted. 4. No pet exceptions. 5. Any attempt to access the property without an authorized code or key will be logged and reported. It was cold. It was corporate. It was perfect. I printed it on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. I went to the front entry closet. the one where an invited guest might hang their coat, and I posted it on the inside of the door. My defenses were layered. First, the LLC. The deed was private, shielded. My utilities were all under the name Halcyon Pine. My mail was routed to a private P.O. box in High Timber. This was my corporate armor. Second, the physical defenses, the smart locks, the reinforced doors, the cameras logging everything. Third, the legal defense, the no trespass letter, filed and waiting. Now, all that was left was the declaration. I sat at my new dining table, the one I had assembled myself, and I remembered Sable's final piece of advice. "They will call you," she had said, standing to signal the end of our hour. "They will cry. They will threaten. They will tell you that you are destroying the family. You will be tempted to argue with them on the porch. That is the trap. That is where they can claim confusion, or a misunderstanding, or that you lost it. You must not engage. You are the managing member of a corporation. This is a business decision. From now on, you communicate with facts, not feelings." I opened my email. I started a new message. I typed in their 3 email addresses, Gregory, Celeste, Julian, in the BCC field. I typed Sable, Winterswinters Legal, com. The subject line was Christmas Plans Kestrel Ridge Property. I wrote, "Dear Gregory, Celeste, and Julian, thank you for the excitement regarding my new property. To clarify the situation and ensure there is no misunderstanding, the house is not available for visits or hosting this holiday. It is a private residence and is not open for guests, nor is it available for anyone to move into. I have already made other, private plans for the Christmas holiday. Please do not travel to High Timber, as I will be unable to accommodate you. Any attempts to access the property will be denied. I trust this clarifies the situation." I did not write love, Faith. I wrote, sincerely, Faith Stewart, Managing Member, Halcyon Pine, LLC. I hit send. The silence that followed was immediate and profound. My phone, which had been vibrating with their demands, went completely dead. The group chat was a tomb. It was the sound of the surf pulling all the way back, gathering its strength before the wave. I stood up. I walked to the side door, the one in the kitchen. I got my drill and the small box from the hardware store. I unscrewed the laughably cheap, half-inch screws that held the thin brass strike plate in place. I fitted the new, heavy-gauge steel plate into the space I had chiseled. I took the new, 3-inch screws. I drove the first one into the wood. It bit past the trim, past the jamb, and sank deep into the 2x4 stud that framed the house itself. I drove in the other 2. I closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. It made a tiny, decisive, final click. It was the sound of no, forged in steel. December 23rd. It was 7:42 p.m. I was in the great room, by the fire, a book open in my lap. The house was silent, warm, and secure. My phone, resting on the side table, buzzed once. Not a text, a notification from the camera app, motion-detected driveway. I set my book down. My heart didn't leap. It just began to beat, a slow, heavy, deliberate rhythm. I opened the app on my phone. The image was grainy, black and white from the infrared, but perfectly clear. 2 headlights, slicing the dark, creeping up my gravel drive. They weren't moving fast. They were moving with purpose. A large, dark SUV. It stopped 20 feet from the house. Doors opened. My mother, Celeste, emerged from the passenger side, pulling her coat tight. My father, Gregory, got out of the driver's seat. He stood stiffly, surveying the house as if it were a hostile corporate headquarters. From the back, Julian unfolded himself, already reaching for luggage. And then, Brielle, his very pregnant wife, moving with the slow, pained caution of her 3rd trimester. They had suitcases, 4 of them. Julian set them on the gravel. Then he reached back into the SUV and pulled out a collapsible crib. He snapped it open with a flick of his wrist, and then a 5th person got out, a man in a work jacket I didn't recognize. He was carrying a long metal toolbox. He looked cold, and he looked embarrassed. They began walking toward my front porch. My phone pinged again. Motion detected porch. I watched them, the four of them, and the locksmith. My family had arrived, with suitcases, a crib, and insanely a man they had hired to break into my home. The dark comedy of it was so bleak, it was almost brilliant. They hadn't just ignored my no, they had planned, budgeted, and executed a strategy to overcome it. The doorbell chimed. The sharp, digital sound echoed in the warm, quiet room. I didn't get up. I didn't go to the door. I pressed the talk icon on the app. My voice, amplified by the tiny speaker on the porch, cut through the freezing night air. It sounded metallic and inhuman. "This is private property. This is not authorized. Please leave." My mother, Celeste, flinched. She looked around, confused, before realizing the voice was coming from the doorbell itself. She rushed the camera, her face looming, distorted by the wide-angle lens. Her voice was a fountain of sugary concern. "Faith, honey, open up. It's freezing out here. Don't be silly. We drove for hours. We brought a smoked ham." A ham, as if it were a password, as if it were the price of admission. I watched, silent. The locksmith looked at my father, who gestured impatiently at the door. "It's the smart lock, the black one," Gregory said. The locksmith sighed, knelt, and began to unpack his tools. He pulled out a drill. That was it. That was the line. My fingers were cold, but perfectly steady. I went to my phone's contact list. I pressed the entry for the High Timber Sheriff's non-emergency line. "County Dispatch." The voice was calm, a little bored. "Hello?" I said, my own voice low and clear. "My name is Faith Stewart. I am the managing member of Halcyon Pine LLC, located at Kestrel Ridge. I am reporting an active trespass. I have a filed no trespass letter, record number 309B, for this parcel. The individuals named in the letter, Gregory, Celeste, and Julian Stewart, are currently on my front porch." I paused, and then delivered the critical fact. "They have brought a locksmith and are, at this moment, attempting to drill my deadbolt." There was a sharp change in the dispatcher's tone. "They are actively attempting to gain entry, ma'am. Are you safe in the house?" "I am safe," I said. "The doors are reinforced, but they are trespassing and attempting to destroy property." "A patrol car is en route," the dispatcher said. "Your parcel number is on file. Please stay inside and do not engage with them." I hung up. I went back to the camera app. The locksmith was working, his drill whining against the reinforced metal jamb I had installed. It wasn't budging. Julian, all pent-up frustration and entitlement, stepped forward. "This is ridiculous." He banged his fist, hard, on the solid wood doorframe. The sound vibrated through the floor of my house, a dull, physical thud. "Faith," he yelled, "stop being dramatic. We're here. The plan is set. Just open the door." I saw Brielle wince, a sharp, pained tightening of her face. She was standing back by the suitcases, rubbing her belly. She whispered, her voice too low for the microphone, but her expression clear. "Julian, stop. Please, Julian, just stop." He ignored her. He was about to hit the door again when the world lit up in red and blue. A patrol car crunched over the gravel, its headlights pinning the entire group in a harsh, white glare. My family froze. They looked like actors caught on a stage when the wrong curtain went up. The locksmith dropped his drill. A deputy stepped out of the car. He was tall, his hat pulled low. He did not look amused. He walked calmly onto the porch. "Good evening, folks," his voice boomed. "Quite a party. What seems to be the problem here?" My mother, Celeste, instantly transformed. She became the matriarch, the victim, her hands clasped at her chest. "Oh, thank goodness. Officer, this is all a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. This is our daughter's house. We've driven all this way for Christmas, and she's not well. She's locked herself in. We're just trying to get to her. We're so worried." The deputy looked at my mother. He looked at the suitcases. He looked at the crib. He looked at the locksmith's tools scattered on the porch. I see, he said. He took a small step back. I'm going to need to see identification from all of you. Please. My father, Gregory, stiffened. I don't see why that's necessary. This is a family matter. I see a property matter. Sir, identification, now. One by one, they handed over their driver's licenses. The deputy looked at each one under his flashlight. Gregory Stewart, Celeste Stewart, Julian Stewart, and you, ma'am. Brielle Stewart, she whispered, her eyes wide. The deputy nodded. He looked at his clipboard. Well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is, I know exactly what's going on here. He turned his flashlight onto the paper on his clipboard. The bad news is, this property is not owned by Faith Stewart. It is owned by a corporation, Halcyon Pine LLC, and I have a legally filed, recorded no trespass letter from the LLC's counsel, specifically barring Gregory, Celeste, and Julian Stewart from this parcel. The silence on the porch was absolute. My mother's face collapsed. The performance was over. An LLC? What are you talking about? That's just paperwork. I am her mother. Ma'am, the deputy said, his voice devoid of sympathy. There is no such thing as family rights when it comes to criminal trespass. This is private property. You were all formally warned not to come here. And you, he turned to the locksmith, were you aware that these individuals were not the owners and had no right to be here? The locksmith was packing his toolbox so fast he was almost throwing the tools in. No, sir, he gestured at my father. Told me it was his daughter's house, that she was indisposed and they were locked out. I'm done. I'm leaving. He grabbed his box and practically ran to his van. My father stepped forward, his voice a low growl. This is completely outrageous. This is harassment. You will be hearing from our lawyers. The deputy did not blink. That is your right, sir. You can call any lawyer you like, but you will be calling them from a hotel, because tonight you are leaving. He reached back into his patrol car and pulled out a large, pre-prepared manila envelope. Here is your copy of the recorded notice. It explains, in detail, that if you return to this property, you will be arrested. If you attempt to contact the owner tonight, it may be considered harassment. So, I'm going to stand here and watch you load your suitcases and your crib back into your vehicle, and then you are going to leave. It was checkmate. Julian looked like he was vibrating with rage, but he said nothing. Gregory snatched the envelope from the deputy's hand. Celeste looked small and cold, and for the first time in my life, completely powerless, wordlessly. They picked up their luggage. Julian grabbed the crib and folded it. They loaded the SUV in a tense, furious silence. The deputy stood, arms crossed, watching. They got in. The doors slammed. The SUV's engine roared. The taillights, red and angry, stuttered down the gravel drive and disappeared onto the main road. The deputy got back into his car and followed them, ensuring they were leaving the mountain. I stood in the center of my living room. The silence that rushed back in was massive. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. The adrenaline, the cold, steady courage I had been running on for days, drained out of me all at once, leaving my knees weak. I gripped the back of the sofa to hold myself up. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 10 years old. I looked out the great glass wall. It was dark. The valley, a pool of black. And then, a single, perfect snowflake drifted past the deck light. Then another, and another. The snow was starting. My knees were shaking, but I was holding. The house had held. Christmas morning. I woke up to a world made new. The snow had fallen all night, heavy and silent. It was at least a foot deep, blanketing the deck, the driveway, and the entire valley in a flawless, glittering white. The A-frame felt like a snow globe, insulated and impossibly quiet. The events of the night before felt distant, a bad dream muffled by the storm. By 10 a.m., the house was no longer quiet. It was full. Priya, Gabe, and Luce had driven up early. their car loaded with presents and a cooler. "We were not letting you be alone after that," Priya had said, hugging me hard at the door. "And we didn't trust your family not to come back for round 2. "They won't," I said, feeling the solidness of the door frame. "It's handled." The best surprise came at 11. A knock at the door, a real one. Polite and expected, revealed my neighbors. The couple from the blue house down the ridge. They were holding a warm casserole pan. "Merry Christmas," the woman, Sarah, said. "We figured you might be snowed in. We brought cinnamon rolls, the good kind, with way too much icing." And just like that, my house was full of my chosen family. We ate cinnamon rolls standing in the kitchen. We brewed pot after pot of coffee. We put on a playlist of instrumental carols. We sat by the fire, the snow falling softly outside the great glass wall, and we talked. We exchanged small, thoughtful gifts. Luce gave me a rare, beautifully illustrated book on mountain wildflowers. Gabe gave me a framed, stylized map of the Elk Crest Range with a tiny gold star over high timber. Priya gave me a ridiculously soft cashmere blanket. My gift to them was the guest rooms. "They're yours," I said. "Whenever you need to get away, you have the code. You don't ever have to ask." It was the easiest, warmest, most peaceful Christmas of my life. I felt a breath of relief so profound it was almost dizzying. This was it. This was the life I had built. This was the peace I had bought. We were rinsing mugs in the kitchen, the dishwasher humming, when Priya, scrolling on her phone, paused. Faith," she said, her voice careful. "You should probably see this." I dried my hands. "What is it?" "Your mom? She posted on Facebook about an hour ago." Priya angled her phone toward me. "She's prolific." I took the phone. My mother's profile picture, a professionally lit photo of her and my father, smiled at me. Her post was public. "Feeling so blessed this Christmas morning." The post began. "After so many challenges, we are thrilled to announce a true Christmas miracle. Julian and Brielle have found the perfect, safe place to start their family. We've been working on it for weeks, and we're so grateful it's all coming together for them. Moving day is just around the corner. Here's a peek at the nursery mood board they've been working on." Below the text was a slick, Pinterest-style image. It showed a crib, a changing table, and a color palette of soft blues and grays, and in the corner, tagged, was a location. It wasn't my exact address, but it was high timber, Elk Crest Range. It was blurred, but easily guessable. It was a dog whistle. The comments were a cascade of congratulations. A Christmas miracle indeed. So happy for them. What a beautiful place, they deserve it. Can't wait for the moving day pictures, so exciting. My blood, which had been warm and slow all morning, turned to ice water. This was not a retreat. This was a flanking maneuver. They had been turned away at the door. So now they were building a public narrative. A narrative in which they were the heroes, the benevolent parents securing a safe place for their children. A narrative in which my house was not mine, but a coming together for them. "She's creating a social media paper trail," I said, my voice flat. I handed the phone back to Priya. Before Priya could even respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. It wasn't a text. It was a direct message on Instagram, from a name I hadn't seen in years. A former classmate from Maple Bridge. I opened it. "Hey, Faith. Weird question. I saw your post about the mountain house. It looks amazing. Just wanted to let you know. I was at my parents' club back in Connecticut last week, and I overheard your dad talking. He was at the bar, asking around for anyone who knew a good mountain property management service in the Elk Crest area. He was specifically using your parcel number. He was telling people his kids had a new property and he needed someone to manage the tenants and upkeep. It was weird. Anyway, Merry Christmas. Hope you're well." I read the message twice. Manage the tenants, upkeep, his kids, plural. I looked up at my friends. They saw the look on my face. The warmth of the room had vanished. "Gabe," I said, my voice sharp. "You're the spreadsheet guy. You're the data guy. What am I looking at?" Gabe, ever practical, put his coffee mug down. He took my phone and read the DM. He had me pull up the Facebook post. He was silent for a full minute, just processing. "Okay," he said, handing the phone back. "Here's what you're looking at. The attack on the 23rd was Phase 1 physical occupation. It failed. They've pivoted to Phase 2 administrative occupation. They're building a paper trail. The Facebook post creates the social expectation of their tenancy. The property management inquiries are your dad trying to find a legal or quasi-legal way to install a third party, someone who could give him access and control, claiming the owners are disorganized. They are trying to build a case that you are not in control, and that they are the responsible parties." A cold, terrible logic clicked into place. This was a strategy. This was a campaign. Just like one I would run at work. "Gabe's right," I said. My mind was racing. If they can create a paper trail, they can try to claim residency, they can try to have their mail sent here. On pure, cold instinct, I grabbed my laptop. I didn't just go to the post office website. I went to the county clerk's public filings portal, the same one Sable and I had used for the no trespass order. I logged into my account, the one tied to my P.O. box and my parcel number. I clicked through the public records, the utility filings, the address registries, and there it was. It was a change of address request, filed online, 2 days ago before they even drove up. It was a request to forward all mail for Julian Stewart and Brielle Stewart from their old Connecticut address to my PSO box in High Timber. It was flagged as pending verification. They had done it. They had already made the move to legally attach themselves to my address. If that had gone through, they could have used the verified address to get driver's licenses, to register their car here, to claim tenancy. The locksmith and the smoked ham weren't the real plan. They were just the shock and awe opening. This was the real invasion. My hands were shaking again, but this time with a cold, clear fury. I screenshotted the Facebook post. I screenshotted the congratulatory comments. I screenshotted the direct message from my classmate. I screenshotted the pending change of address form, the pending status glowing red on the screen. I opened a new email. I attached everything. To Sable, Winter Swinters Legal, come subject phase 2. My message was short. Sable, they've pivoted. They are attempting to establish residency through mail fraud and are building a public narrative of tenancy. See attached. What is our next move? I sent it. My phone buzzed, not 60 seconds later. It was a reply from Sable. Her autoresponder was on for the holiday, but this was a direct, manual reply. It was 2 sentences. Do not engage, do not post, do not text, do not call. This is no longer a family dispute. It is attempted fraud. Meet me at my office on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Tuesday. I had to wait a whole day. My friends were watching me, their faces a mixture of concern and disbelief. "They're insane," Luce whispered, shaking her head. "This is full-on criminal. It's just control," I said, the words forming in my throat. I looked around the room, at the warm fire, the half-eaten cinnamon rolls, the people who had driven hours to be with me. My phone buzzed one more time. It was a new text message, from a different number. Nana Ruth. It was a single line. "Proud of you for not opening the door." I closed my laptop. I picked up the dirty coffee mugs from the counter. I walked to the sink and turned on the hot water, the steam rising to meet my face. This was never about Christmas. It was never about a holiday or a forgotten invitation. It was never about needing a place to stay. It was about control. It was about an entire family system built on the idea that my time, my money, my successes, and now my home were not actually mine. They were just resources, waiting to be allocated to Julian. I had bought a house, and in doing so, I had committed the one unforgivable sin. I had created a boundary, and they, in turn, were showing me that tradition was just the prettiest word for control. I washed the mugs, one by one, and watched the snowfall. Tuesday, 9 a.m. The game was on. The Monday I spent waiting for my Tuesday meeting with Sable was the longest day of my life. I stayed in the A-frame, working remotely, my phone on the table next to me, silent. The silence was a coiled spring. My family was regrouping. I knew, as a strategist, that the first assault had failed, and they were now planning a more sophisticated attack. My Christmas Day email to Sable, with its payload of screenshots, was the opening shot in a new, quieter war. I drove down to High Timber on Tuesday morning. The snow was beginning to melt, leaving ugly, gray piles on the side of the road. The charm of the snow globe was gone. Now, it was just cold. I walked into Sable Winter's office at 8:59 a.m. She was already at her desk, a stack of files in front of her. The room was cold. "Faith," she said, not as a greeting, but as an acknowledgement. She gestured to the chair. "I received your email on Christmas. You were right to be concerned. They are escalating precisely as predicted." I placed my laptop bag on the floor. "The change of address form was the most, It was their first move," Sable interrupted, holding up a single finger. "But not their only one. I took the liberty of running a full-spectrum check on your LLC and the parcel number yesterday." She turned her monitor to face me. "While you were dealing with the social media front, your father was busy on the legal one. Yesterday, a new filing appeared at the county registrar's office. It was time-stamped 9 a.m. This," she clicked, and a document filled the screen. It was a scanned PDF. It looked like something typed on a home computer, a simple, one-page Word document, but the header read, "Informal Family Tenancy Agreement." My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. The letter was dated 2 weeks ago, before the confrontation on my porch. It was a simple, badly written agreement, stating that Halcyon Pine LLC, in consideration of family unity and support, granted full-time, indefinite tenancy to Julian Stewart and Brielle Stewart for the property at Kestrel Ridge, and at the bottom, in the signature line for the LLC's managing member, was my name. "Faith Stewart," it read, in a looping, unfamiliar script. "That," I said, my voice a whisper, "is not my signature." "I didn't imagine it was," Sable said, her voice dry. "It's a forgery, and a clumsy one. The S in Stewart is looped, and yours is a sharp vertical, based on your LLC agreement, but that's not the best part." She zoomed in on the signature. "They signed it, Faith M. Stewart. What's your middle initial?" "I don't have one," I said. "My name is just Faith Ann Stewart." "Exactly," Sable said. "They invented a middle initial. They attempted to create a legal person. Faith M. Stewart, who could consent to their invasion. It's a classic, desperate move. It's also felony fraud." I stared at the screen, at the name that was mine, but not mine. They hadn't just tried to break into my house. They were trying to replace me. They were creating a puppet version of me on paper. A version who was cooperative, who understood her role, who would sign her life away to be useful. "So what does this do?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Legally, it's garbage," Sable said, "but it's not for a judge. It's for a utility company. It's for the post office. It's a piece of proof they can show someone at a counter to say, 'See, we're allowed to be here. They're building their stack.'" She clicked to a new window. "Which brings me to this, your father's property management inquiries. I put a high-priority alert on your LLC and your parcel number with all state and county level agencies. We got 2 pings yesterday." She pulled up the first one. "The Department of Motor Vehicles. Someone attempted to register a vehicle, a new Subaru, to your mountain address. The primary applicant was Julian Stewart. He tried to register his car here. He did. The paperwork lists his contact information, but the Kestrel Ridge address, it was flagged by the system and rejected because the property owner, Halcyon Pine LLC, did not match the applicant, and the family tenancy agreement they provided," she gestured to the forgery, "wasn't a valid lease, but they tried." She pulled up the second ping. "This one is from the utility company. The inquiry log shows 2 calls, both from your father's mobile number. which I cross-referenced. I leaned in. The notes from the customer service rep were detailed. Customer Gregory Stewart called, Sable read, requesting to be added as a secondary responsible party to the account for Halcyon Pine LLC, stated his daughter, the owner, was overwhelmed and he was helping to manage her affairs and pay the bills. He wanted his name on the account. I felt sick. It was the same story, the same narrative. Faith is unstable. Faith is dramatic. Faith can't handle it. We, the adults, need to step in and manage. He wasn't just trying to get a key. He was trying to get control. He was trying to build a paper trail that proved I was incompetent. He was denied, Sable said, because he did not have the LLC's federal tax ID number or your corporate password. But you see the pattern, physical, then digital, then administrative. This is a siege. I looked at her. So what do we do? How do we fight this? Sable cracked her knuckles. It was the first human, non-legal gesture I had ever seen her make. We fight back, we stop defending, and we go on the offense. I've spent the morning drafting. She turned back to her monitor. First, a formal cease and desist. This isn't a polite email. Faith. This is a 20-page document that I'm sending via certified mail. Signature required. To Gregory, Celeste, and Julian, individually. It outlines, in forensic detail, their illegal actions. It lists the attempted mail fraud. It lists the attempted vehicle registration fraud. It lists the forgery of the tenancy agreement. It names the date and time of the trespass. It informs them that any further attempt at contact, physical or digital, will be met with immediate legal action. She clicked. Second, notices of potential fraud. These go out today, to the postmaster in High Timber, to the DMV, to the county registrar, and to every utility company, from the power to the internet. It alerts them that your accounts are under active, fraudulent attack. It freezes all changes. It requires a new verbal password, known only to you and me, for any modifications. We are walling them out of the infrastructure. She clicked again. Third, and this one is my favorite. A certified warning to the family council you never authorized. Your father mentioned lawyers. Your classmate overheard him inquiring about property managers. He is representing himself, or them, as having a legal right. This letter informs this fictional lawyer that his clients are engaging in criminal fraud and that any further action on their behalf will be seen as complicity. It's a trap. It forces them to either hire a lawyer, who will now be on notice, or to admit they were lying. My head was spinning. This was a level of corporate warfare I had only read about. Finally, she said, her voice dropping, I am filing a petition for a temporary protective order, contingent upon their next move. The no trespass letter was step 1. This is step 2. It sits at the courthouse, ready. The second they attempt to file another document, send another fraudulent email, or set foot on your road, I make one call, and it triggers an immediate hearing before a judge. She swiveled her chair back to me. They think they are playing a family game. We are going to respond with corporate and criminal law. They will not know what hit them. I left her office an hour later, my hands full of copies, my mind numb but clear. The dread was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. When I got back to my car, I saw I had a text from Priya. She had been, in her words, running social surveillance. It was a screenshot. My mother hadn't made a new post. She had commented on an old friend's post. The friend had written, So glad Julian and Brielle have a safe place to go. You are such a good grandmother. And my mother, Celeste, had replied, just an hour ago, We are too. We are so grateful our children will be safe up there. I stared at the words, up there. It wasn't at Faith's house. It wasn't at the A-frame. It was up there, a vague, depersonalized, unclaimed territory. It was the language of annexation. It was a fait accompli, a thing already done. She was, in her own passive-aggressive, socially acceptable way, declaring victory. I saved the screenshot. I forwarded it to Sable, who replied with a single, Got it. I sat there. I was walled in. The locks were solid. The legal file was thick, but they were still probing. They were looking for a crack. The driveway camera and the porch camera were good. But what about the rest of the property? The side lot, where the trees were thick, the mailbox cluster at the end of the road, where my P.O. box was. I was a strategist. I needed more data. I opened my laptop. Right there in the car. I didn't go to a security store. I went to a hunting and outdoor supply website. I ordered a small, battery-powered trail cam. It was waterproof, motion-activated, and camouflaged in a bark pattern. It had a geofencing capability. I would mount it in a pine tree overlooking the mailboxes and the side lot. If anything, or anyone, crossed that perimeter, my phone would ping. I closed the laptop. My defense was almost complete. I looked at my phone, the device that was now my primary weapon and shield. I went to my settings, to the lock screen, to the in case of emergency contacts. It had been the same for 10 years. ICE 1. Mom. ICE 2, Dad. My fingers hovered over the red delete button. This was the last thread, the reflexive childhood instinct that, if I were broken, bleeding, or unconscious on the side of a road, they were the ones to call. They were the ones who would save me, but they weren't. They were the emergency. I pressed the button. I deleted Mom. I pressed the button again. I deleted Dad. The list was empty. I tapped Add New Contact. I scrolled through my phone book until I found the new entry I had made that morning. Ice Sable Winters. I clicked Done. I locked my phone. The new directive sat there, invisible but active. It was a quiet declaration. I would not be ambushed. The person to call when I was in trouble was no longer my family. It was my attorney. The pressure cooker doesn't wait for business hours. It detonates in the dead of night. December 30th, 2:11 a.m. I was in a deep, exhausted sleep when the new alert tone, the one I had set just for the geofence, sliced through the silence. It wasn't the polite ping of my driveway camera. It was a harsh digital shriek. I was out of bed before I was conscious, my heart hammering. My phone's screen was blindingly bright. Geofence alert perimeter breach. Mailbox cluster. I opened the trail cam app. The feed was grainy, washed in the alien green of night vision, but the image was undeniable. A dark, familiar sedan was idling on the gravel shoulder next to the community mailbox cluster, its engine a faint rumble. The driver's door opened. My father, Gregory, stepped out. He wasn't in a suit. He was in a dark coat, his face pale and grim in the infrared light. He looked around, up and down the deserted mountain road. He thought he was invisible. He walked not to the outgoing mail slot, but directly to my P.O. box, my box, number 42. He had a stack of thick, white business envelopes in his hand. He didn't have a key. He didn't need one by one. He forced them through the narrow mail slot, jamming them into the locked box. It was a violation, a physical act of force. He was planting them. He was stuffing my tiny, secure fortress with his fraudulent evidence. He was serving me in the dead of night, creating a paper trail that would show he had delivered the documents. He jammed the last one through, smoothed his coat, and got back in the car. The sedan pulled away, its taillights vanishing down the pass. I stood in my dark, silent living room. I did not go back to bed. I sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, and watched the clock. The pressure was building. The house was silent, but the air was screaming. At 6 a.m., just as the sky was turning a bruised, cold gray, I put on my boots and my parka. I drove the half-mile down to the mailbox cluster. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. I stood in front of box 42. I put my key in the lock. It stuck, just for a second, blocked by the wad of paper inside. I forced it. The small metal door swung open. They spilled out. 3 thick, white envelopes. They weren't addressed. They were just folded, with Faith Stewart written on the outside. I sat in my car, the engine running for warmth, and opened the first one. Household member affidavit. It was a form, addressed to my insurance company. It was a declaration, stating that Julian Stewart and Brielle Stewart were now full-time residents of the property at Kestrel Ridge and were to be added to my homeowner's policy as additional household members. At the bottom, it was signed by my father, Gregory Stewart, property manager. I opened the second one. It was nearly identical. This one was addressed to the High Timber Homeowners Association, a body that did not exist. He was inventing an HOA, just so he could file paperwork with it. He was building an entire fictional bureaucracy to support his claims. The third envelope was a simple letter, typed and signed by him. It was a formal notice, informing me that as property manager, he had taken these steps to ensure the security and insurance of the asset on behalf of the family stakeholders. I did not drive back to the house. I sat there in the cold, gray dawn at the side of the road. I pulled out my phone. I took high-resolution, crystal-clear photographs of every single page. I went into the TrailCam app. I downloaded the video file timestamped 2:11 a.m. to 2:13 a.m. I saved the clip of him forcing the envelopes into my box. I opened a new email. To Sable, Winterswinters Legal, calm subject. Urgent, 2:11 a.m. He's done it. I attached the video file. I attached the photographs of the affidavits. My message was simple. Sable, he planted these in my pincho box at 2:11 this morning. I have the video. He is actively manufacturing evidence. This is the household member paperwork. What is our move? My phone buzzed with a reply before I had even put the car in drive. It was 7:08 a.m. Sable's reply. This is the last piece. He's created his own evidence loop. He is planting, and will now discover, his own paperwork. This is the act of a criminal, not a father. I am filing the emergency motion now. I am attaching the video and the affidavits. He is done. I drove back to the house, my entire body humming with a cold, clear, righteous energy. The pressure was no longer in my chest. It was now fully, completely on them. I made coffee. I watched the sun hit the valley. I waited. At 11:52 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Sable. It's done. Emergency motion filed, attaching stills from the video and the fraudulent affidavits. The county clerk stamped it before noon. The petition for the protective order is now active and on a judge's desk. The next time they breathe on you, it will be executed. It was a victory, clean, swift, decisive. At 12:05 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a number I had not silenced, but had not heard from in days. My mother. Celeste. We tried everything the nice way. Faith, you left us no choice. The timing was terrifying. Had they been notified by the court already? Or was this the next, pre-planned beat in their psychological war? It didn't matter. The language, the nice way, the locksmith, the screaming on my porch, the forged tenancy agreement, the 2A covert operation. This was their nice way. You left us no choice. The final, hollow anthem of the perpetrator. You made me do this. My moral clarity was absolute. I was not angry. I was not sad. I was finished. I did not reply. I did not block her. I screenshotted the text. I forwarded it, without comment, to Sable. Sable's reply. 1 minute later, acknowledged, added to the petition as a direct threat, do not reply. I silenced the thread. My mother, my father, my brother. Muted. The phone rang almost immediately. My heart jumped, but it was Nana Ruth. I answered. Hi, Nana. Her voice was a crackle of pure, undiluted fury. I just got off the phone with your mother. She's in hysterics, utterly hysterical, sobbing about how you've filed a motion and you're using lawyers to ruin the family at New Year's. She's right, I said, my voice calm. I did. Good, Nana shouted, and I heard a glass clink. I told her. I said, Celeste, you reap what you sow, and you planted a field of snakes. And then I told her, you listen to me. If you or that husband of yours, or that boy you ruined, set one more foot on that mountain, I am not just calling Faith, I am calling Pastor Dale. I'm calling the head of the church prayer circle, and I'm going to tell every single one of them, in detail, what Stewart family values look like when no one is watching. I'll tell them about the forgery. I'll tell them about the locksmith. I'll tell them about your husband skulking around mailboxes in the middle of the night. We'll see how your precious reputation holds up when it's read out loud at the next bake sale. A small, sharp bark of laughter escaped me. It was the first time I had laughed in a week. My God, Nana, that's surgical. It's the only language they understand, she said, her voice grim. Shame. Now listen to me. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. They are vipers, but they are dramatic vipers. They love a holiday. They love an audience. Do not, under any circumstances, be alone in that house tomorrow night. You hear me? I hear you, Nana, I said. I think I have a plan. I hung up. Don't be alone. A safety plan. My mind was already moving. I had the legal defense. I had the social defense. Thanks to Nana. Now I needed the physical defense, but not a defense of walls and locks. A defense of light and warmth and noise and witnesses. I called Sarah, my neighbor from down the ridge. Sarah, hi, it's Faith from the A-frame. I know this is incredibly last minute, but I'm having a small, very informal open house tomorrow night for New Year's Eve. Just hot cocoa and some chili. Would you and Tom be free to stop by? We'd love to, she said, her voice warm. We'll bring that weird appetizer with the olives. I sent a group text to Priya, Gabe, and Luce. Subject NYE plan. My place, 7 p.m. Bring your loudest voices and your worst board games. We are having a party. Gabe's reply. On our way. We are your social shields. The next day, December 31st, I prepared for battle. I made a huge pot of chili that simmered all afternoon, filling the house with the scent of cumin and garlic. I set up a hot cocoa bar on the dining table, mini marshmallows, chocolate shavings, peppermint sticks, whipped cream. My friends arrived at 6, stomping snow off their boots, their arms full of wine and chips. The perimeter is secure, Luce announced, giving me a hug. My neighbors, Sarah and Tom, arrived at 7. 2 other couples from the ridge, people I'd only waved to, saw the lights and my open door and stopped by. By 7:30, my house was full. It was loud. It was warm. Laughter was bouncing off the high, beamed ceilings. This was the fortress. This was the real security. They couldn't play the worried family card to a room full of my laughing, happy, adult friends. They couldn't be the victims if I was the gracious host. I took one last step. I went to my office. I took out the laminated sleeve I had made. On one side was the original no trespass letter. On the other side was the first page of the emergency motion petition, stamped in red by the county clerk just yesterday. I walked to the front entry table, right by the front door. I set it on a small, iron display stand. I placed it between the stack of party napkins and the row of clean coffee mugs for the hot cocoa. It was a decoration, a statement of fact. Priya saw it. She whistled, low. Damn, Faith, that's the coldest, most beautiful fuck you I've ever seen. It's just the guest policy, I said, smoothing the front of my sweater. I looked at the door they had tried to drill. I looked at my friends, their faces bright in the firelight. I looked at the laminated truth, sitting there for any visitor to read. I would not negotiate my home on a doorstep. I would not be ambushed. I would not be dragged into another screaming match. The debate was over. The facts were printed. My vow was silent, but it settled in my bones, as solid as the reinforced steel in the door jamb. I turned to my guests, a bright, genuine smile on my face. Okay, who wants the first mug of hot cocoa? I have the good marshmallows. We were laughing. My neighbor, Tom, was in the middle of a story about a bear that had tried to steal his recycling bin, and the chili was almost gone. The house was loud and bright. Then, the laughter died. Not all at once, but in a slow, tapering wave. Starting from the neighbors standing nearest the great glass wall, their smiles froze. "Faith," Sarah whispered, her hand tightening on her mug. "You've got company." I looked out. The familiar, menacing crunch of gravel under heavy tires echoed up the drive. Not one vehicle, but two. Two large, dark SUVs, grinding their way up my road. Their headlights cut harsh, white slashes across my living room wall, illuminating the shocked faces of my guests. It was 8:03 p.m., New Year's Eve. The room went absolutely quiet. I felt Priya's hand find my shoulder and squeeze. A small, firm pressure of support. Across the room, I saw Gabe lift his phone, not obtrusively, but angling it toward the door. He pressed record. The doors of the SUV slammed. A series of flat, angry sounds in the cold night. Gregory, Celeste, Julian, and Brielle, looking pale and exhausted, clutching her coat, but they weren't alone. A fifth person emerged from the passenger side of the lead car, a man I had never seen, wearing a sharp dark blazer despite the freezing cold, carrying a polished leather briefcase. They walked onto the porch. My father, Gregory, did not ring the bell. He knocked, a loud, formal, impatient thump thump thump, like a CEO demanding entry to a meeting. I set my mug down on the counter. I walked to the front door. My guests parted, silent. I looked at the entry table. My laminated documents were sitting there, right next to the peppermint sticks. I felt a complete, cold calm settle over me. I opened the door. The cold air rushed in, swirling around my ankles. They were all standing there, framed in the light. They were visibly startled. They had expected me to be alone. They had not expected a room full of smiling, silent witnesses. My mother, Celeste, faltered, her prearranged, worried mother face collapsing into confusion. The man in the blazer stepped forward. He was all practiced, calm, and expensive cologne. "Ms. Stewart Faith Stewart," he asked, his voice smooth and artificially reasonable. "My name is Mr. Harrison. I'm a family mediator, retained by your parents to resolve this situation amicably. There is no situation to resolve. Mr. Harrison," I said. My voice was steady, and I amplified it just enough for everyone in the room behind me to hear every word. I looked past him. "Gregory, Celeste, Julian, you are trespassing. You were served with a legal notice to stay away from this property. Mr. Harrison held up a placating hand, as if to calm a hysterical child. "Now, Faith, that's not how we see it. That's not how the law sees it." He opened his briefcase with a series of small, fussy clicks. He pulled out a document. "I have here a temporary occupancy agreement. Predated. It cites your consent for Julian and Brielle to take up residence." "I never consented," I said, my voice flat. "Ah," he said, tapping the paper with one clean finger. "But you did. This document cites consent by silence. Your failure to engage in a productive, family-oriented dialogue after their initial, reasonable request constitutes tacit approval under family mediation guidelines. We are simply here to finalize the move-in." Consent by silence. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. They had invented a new kind of law. A law where my refusal to be bullied was twisted into my permission. I almost smiled. "Mr. Harrison," I said, "that is the most creative and most desperate legal theory I have ever heard." I turned my back to them for a second. I walked the 2 steps to the entry table. I picked up my laminated document, the one sitting next to the hot cocoa mugs. I turned back to the door and held it up, the light from the porch catching the plastic. "This," I said, my voice as crisp and cold as the night air, "is the LLC deed to this property. It is owned by Halcyon Pine, not by Faith Stewart. This," I tapped the second page, "is the no trespass order, filed and recorded with the county sheriff, specifically naming them. This," I tapped the third page, is the cease and desist letter outlining their attempts at mail fraud. And this is my favorite. This is the emergency motion, stamped yesterday by the county clerk, acknowledging their criminal forgery of a tenancy agreement. The mediator's smile twitched. He was clearly missing some data. I looked past him, locking eyes with my father. Consent by silence isn't consent. Gregory, it's a delusion. You do not live here. Julian, who had been vibrating with a silent, childish rage, finally snapped. He sneered, his voice dripping with the condescension that had been the soundtrack of my life. You think this is impressive? Your little party, your fake friends, you're alone. Faith, you're one person. We're a family. It was the old weapon, the one they always used. You are alone. We are many. I didn't even look at him. I looked just past his shoulder, into the dark corner of my own entryway. I'm not alone, I said. I nodded. Officer, you can come in now. From the shadows of the entry hall, where he had been standing quietly at my prior invitation, Deputy Miller stepped forward into the porch light. He was in full uniform, his hat in his hand, his expression absolutely neutral. My family froze. My father's face went from stern to ashen in a fraction of a second. My mother let out a tiny, choked gasp. Mr. Harrison, the mediator, looked like he had swallowed his tie. Sable had pre-coordinated it, a welfare standby. He was here to ensure the peace was kept. The deputy stepped past me, standing in the doorway, a solid, immovable object between my home and my family. He didn't look at me. He addressed them. Mr. and Mrs. Stewart, Mr. Julian Stewart, you are in violation of a filed no trespass order. You are also in violation of an active emergency petition for a protective order. You have been warned. He held up a thick white envelope. This is a formal summons. Any other attempt to enter this property, to interfere with the mail, or to contact the owner of this LLC will result in your immediate arrest. He held it out. Not to my father, but to all of them. You are served. Gregory stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. My mother, Celeste, finally broke. The performance was over. She let out a small, sobbing sound and, in a desperate gesture, she reached for Brielle's hand, the only other mother, her last ally, and then the entire rotten structure collapsed. Brielle yanked her hand away. She pulled it back so hard she stumbled, her eyes wide and wet in the harsh porch light. Her voice was trembling, but it was clear and sharp. No, she whispered, a sound that cut through the night. No, we're not doing this. She looked at Julian, tears of humiliation and rage streaming down her face. I am not having my baby in a house we stole. I'm going home. She turned, weeping, and walked away from them. She fumbled for the door handle of the SUV, got in, and slammed the door. My father, Gregory, was deflated. He had lost. He tried the old tone, the reasonable father voice, one last, pathetic time. Faith, be reasonable. I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was staring, aghast, at Brielle's retreating back. I looked at my brother, who was just standing there, dumbfounded, his entire world unmaking itself. I was steady. Dad, I said. I am being reasonable. You're leaving my property. Now, the deputy gestured with his flashlight. Not at them, but at the dark driveway. This way, folks. The show's over. Julian looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw the officer's hand resting on his belt. He said nothing. My father snatched the summons from the deputy's hand. Celeste followed, a small, defeated woman. The mediator grabbed his briefcase and nearly ran to the car. The deputy stood, arms crossed, and watched them all get in. We all stood there, my guests in my living room, me on my porch. We watched the taillights, for the last time, stutter down the ridge road and vanish. The room exhaled. It was a single, collective sound of released tension. I stood there for a moment in the cold, clean, quiet air. I looked at the spot where they had stood. Then, I stepped back inside. I closed my solid wood door. I turned the deadbolt. The heavy, reinforced thunk sounding final. I turned back to my friends, my neighbors, my guests. They were all looking at me, their eyes wide. I smiled, a real, warm smile. As I was saying, I said, walking toward the kitchen. Hot cocoa on the deck. Who wants extra whipped cream? Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. And feel free to share your own thoughts on this. Please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And if this story resonated with you, please support us by hitting that hype button